Okay, let's do one more question. Fun theory crafting time. What's a weapon from any other game you would want in Destiny, and how badly does it break PvP from the Omega? I can already see the
OP, or
wheels.
could it just be cool? Because I
It could be
think
cool. Yeah, it could be cool. Sure.
Waldo can answer this question for me.
I can answer the question for you.
Yeah.
It would. I'm just thinking of which weapon from Halo it would be. Like, would it be the DMT? Would it be the battle rifle, or would it be?
DMT's already there.
DMT's already there. Okay, so you would probably. So you want battle rifle? I'm guessing. Yeah. Yeah, you want battle.
Oh. Dude, I got my guns back. Oh no, LPR with one shot. No, you don't let that happen. You just can't let that happen. BXR's up? Where are they? I just BXR'd that super. No BR'ing. Let's go. Oh, I got BXR. Oh my, that should never ever happen. BXR, baby. The BXR-55 Battler is a new 450 RPM pulse rifle that comes with the 30th anniversary pack and appears to be a tribute to the Halo series battle rifle, except now for use in the Destiny universe. It bears visual similarities, as you can probably tell, and it has the legacy PR-55 frame, and the icon for which is actually very similar to the Mizraya Armory icon, the manufacturer of the battle rifle in the Halo universe. So instead of getting a lightweight bonus, this weapon gets its legacy PR-55 frame, which reads it's a customized frame with dramatically increased accuracy, stability, and targeting while hip firing. For those who are interested, my choice perks on this weapon are arrowhead break, ricochet rounds, snapshot sights, blunt execution rounds, a fun new perk that has come with this weapon, and a stability masterwork. I'll be talking a bit more about the in-depth stats and the mechanics of some of these perks and different god rolls you can go for, but that'll be a little later in the video. This is definitely going to be a longer video. I've put a lot of work into this video, as this weapon is my favorite weapon in first-person shooter history. I've included many chapters to allow you to easily skip around to different portions or sections that you would like to know based on the information that you're seeking. So feel free to use that. As I mentioned, the BXR-55 Battler seems to be paying an homage or nod to the BR-55 battle rifle, which is used in Halo 2 and Halo 3. The name BXR-55 seems to come from a variation of the original name, which is BR-55, or I guess Battle Rifle 55. They added the X, and that is representative of a button glitch. BXR was a button glitch in Halo 2, which we'll go over a little later, as we have a perk called Blunt Execution Rounds, which even further references that. The RPM of the BXR-55 is a little bit faster than the original battle rifle, being 450 RPM. The battle rifle is a bit slower of a rate of fire than that. The full scope zoom is another thing that references the classic battle rifle from the Halo series. We can see that these are very similar when they zoom in and have a similar amount of zoom. The crosshairs is another thing that is quite similar. The crosshairs might not be exactly the same, as there is a little bit of movement in the BXR-55s. However, it is very similar to the Halo 2 and Halo 3's battle rifle. The aim assist on these weapons is actually very similar as well, funny enough, and I assume that's a factor in making sure that both of these weapons feel similar. I think perhaps one of my favorite parts about the BXR-55 Battler and the way that it pays tribute to the battle rifle is in its flavor text. It reads, "A treasured competition piece from a bygone era." This is a reference to the MLG or Major League Gaming era of Halo 2 and Halo 3, which was a high point in the game's competitive history. The battle rifle was the starting weapon in that competitive setting of Major League Gaming tournaments. That's why it most likely reads a treasured competition piece, but again, from a bygone era, because this was quite a long time ago at this point. Now that I've done an adequate amount of nerding out over the small references made on this weapon, let's talk about the best builds of this weapon and the god rolls you are going to be wanting to go for. I included as many as I possibly could for different purposes and different builds, but I want to highlight some key perks and why I think they're very important, as they're repetitive through some of these builds. Firstly, I think Arrowhead Break is one of, if not the most important perk to get in most of these ideal rolls. You use it to get to 100 recoil direction for that maximum consistency without requiring a counterbalance mod. And what that does is it gives you a free slot for either Freehand or Icarus, what I think are the two best mods on this weapon. It doesn't mean this weapon's bad if you don't get this, it's just then you'll have to use your mod slot on a counterbalance mod to ensure consistency. Mind you, in some cases you're going to get better stats, but I think overall just letting Arrowhead do this is the best route, in my opinion. In the next column, Ricochet, Accurize, or Steady Rounds, they're all pretty great. You're honestly just looking for some sort of a significant stat boost, the most that you can get out of the perks on this column, and these three are the best. I think Ricochet is the best out of all of them, just because it gives you a mix of both range and stability for no cost. But again, Accurize is great, and even though Steady Rounds comes with a cost, stability is very significant on this weapon and important, so it's still a good option. For our first trait perk, either Snapshot or Perpetual Motion are usually the best overall perks for consistency or versatility, in my opinion, and Demolitionist is good for specialized builds. Kill Clip is the best lethality perk in our second trait option, but Eye of the Storm is the best consistency perk. The BXR perk, or Blunt Execution Rounds, is a niche jack of all trades. Lastly, Adrenaline Junkie or Elemental Capacitor are still great perks for more specialized builds, aiming for specific synergy. I think Stability is the best masterwork overall for maximizing on hipfire consistency and staying on target while in ADS for much needed headshots, because these are essential because of the 450 RPM archetype. My pick of perks for an overall all-purpose god roll is Arrowhead, Ricochet, Snapshot, the Blunt Execution Rounds perk, and a Stability Masterwork. This is actually the one that I use very regularly all the time. I absolutely love it. It is great in both 3s because the Blunt Execution perk is a damage perk that does not require a kill. It's great in 6s because it's still a damage perk. And if you ever want to take this into PvE, it's actually kind of decent in PvE as well. So I love this for the all-around, all-purpose roll. For 6v6, if you're looking for a really lethal roll, I'd go with Arrowhead and Ricochet again. You can go with either one, Perpetual Motion or Snapshot. You're usually always moving in 6s, so Perpetual Motion could make this a laser beam. And then you get Kill Clip, of course, to really boost your lethality, and you can keep chaining that. And either a range or Stability Masterwork will do on this. The ultimate consistency roll to me is Arrowhead Break, Ricochet Rounds, Perpetual Motion, and Eye of the Storm with a range masterwork. Perpetual Motion and the stability level with Ricochet and Arrowhead should be about 100 stability or somewhere close to that. Really high stability already, so you don't really need a stability masterwork with this. You want to maximize on range because that does help you with not only your range capability, but your accuracy cone, which is important. And then Eye of the Storm is going to further add on to that. So this should be a very, very consistent roll if you're looking for just the best consistency possible, but it will lack lethality, of course, because of the archetype. For grenade builds, I think you want to go with Arrowhead, Ricochet, Demolitionist, and Adrenaline Junkie, probably with a stability masterwork as well to make sure that you're getting to about 80 stability. Demolitionist will get you your grenades. Adrenaline Junkie lets you not only get a lethality boost, but a big lethality boost out of converting with your grenades. So that's good for grenade builds, of course. And then for you stasis mains out there, you can actually go for Chambered Compensator or Extended Barrel, either one, as they provide a +10 to recoil direction. Add on Ricochet, maybe Demolitionist, because stasis does have longer cooldowns for the grenades and very good grenades at that. And then Elemental Capacitor. So LA Cap is going to give you that recoil direction that you'd normally be getting from Arrowhead added on with Chambered Compensator. So you'll still have the free mod slot. And with LA Cap, you're going to be able to have a faster strafe speed when you're in the full zoom scope. And then on top of this, I'd add maybe either a stability or range masterwork. It's really up to you, whichever makes up for the stats that you're losing, I would say, or want to double down on. Lastly, for a Void main, this would be a really good build. Arrowhead, Ricochet, Snapshot, or maybe Killing Wind as a different mix up here. And then Elemental Capacitor for maximum stability. And lastly, you'll want a range masterwork with this because that's the next most valuable stat, and LA Cap's gonna take care of your stability. Now that we've gone through all our god rolls and the ideal builds of the BXR-55, let's break down some perks and mechanics on this. So the first one, and the most interesting one, is the Legacy Frame. So this gives it increased stability, accuracy, and target acquisition, which I believe means aim assist when hip firing. I did get confirmation from Chris Proctor that the initial hipfire accuracy is actually similar to other pulses, but it clearly doesn't grow or bloom out as much as other pulses. This does mean though that this weapon still has bloom when hip firing, even though the crosshairs don't reflect it incredibly much. If you actually turn down your FOV, you will see the bloom happen and it will be reflected in the crosshairs. For this reason, I think there is a bit of an advantage to ever so slightly pacing your shots when you're hip firing to ensure the best accuracy you possibly can and your shots land consistently, because this isn't like ADSing. Again, we had confirmation that the hipfire is actually similar to the base hipfire of other pulses, so it's not as accurate as ADSing. So just keep that in mind. While the accuracy might be similar, it still does get increased stability to make sure that it doesn't feel too jarring to fire from the hip and you can stay on target nicely. And the target acquisition does give you just a bit more leniency when you are shooting, so it feels good. It feels intuitive, I want to say. It is important to remember though that these Legacy Frame enhancements are only while hip firing. Otherwise, when using it with the zoom scope, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's just a standard 450 RPM pulse as far as I'm aware. The BXR-55 does get the full zoom scope, and it's a callback of course to the scope zoom on the battle rifle in Halo. Now in Destiny 2 though, this actually doesn't function any differently from a traditional ADS sights or aim down sights. It's just represented, I think, in a different way visually. From as far as I can tell, the crosshairs still recoil and move with each shot individually, and it still gets hit by flinch. So this full zoom scope might be love or hate for many, I think. For me, I love the big crosshairs and the clarity it provides to manage recoil or flinch, I think. But I think some others might hate it because they prefer a more precise crosshair and a little bit better of a visual experience with the weapon. Maybe it's a little bit jarring. As far as our time to kill on the weapon, this archetype has a 0.87 second optimal time to kill. This will be 7 crit 1 body against low resilience, but 8 crit against 5 and up resilience. For the body shot time to kill of this archetype, funny enough, I had to go back and re-record this because all our known information on current spreadsheets says that lightweight pulses kill in 4 bursts. That's 12 shots in 1.33 seconds. That's actually incorrect, and they kill in, even against 2 resilience, 13 shots. That is 1 bullet extra, and to make matters worse, 1 bullet extra in the next available burst, which means it's even longer and more separated. And while the formula for pulse rifle time to kill is a lot more complicated than anything else in the game because you have to factor in the time between bursts, looking back at some old numbers that I was able to find, this means its body shot time to kill is somewhere around 1.6 seconds. And it gets even worse because against high resilience, you can make it take another bullet. So this will be in the same burst, so it won't be as punishing per se, but that is a 14 shot body shot kill, which is horrid. This archetype really seems to be one-to-one with the adaptive hand cannons, except in pulse rifle form, which means spending more time on target is purely just harder. Because of this, this archetype is definitely even worse than I thought it was. So overall, you want to expect a 4 burst kill on average in most 1v1 gunfights. Sometimes you may get a 3 burst, but it is very demanding for you to do so. You have to hit a lot of headshots and you can't afford to miss a bullet. This becomes a lot harder in 1v1 gunfights, especially above all against hand cannons because of flinch. If you miss a single bullet, you are probably not getting that 3 burst. So in a 1v1 gunfight against a hand cannon, they're probably going to knock you off for at least 1 bullet most of the time, and then you will have to use a 4th burst to get the kill. Now you still can get the kill early 4th burst, which is funny because that's actually pretty in line with the Halo battle rifle, funny enough, but it still hurts your time to kill quite a bit because it'll be closer to 1.33 seconds, which is really not good against the 3 taps of a hand cannon, I want to say. But I'm not going to get too much into a comparison in this weapon's place in the meta because we'll have another section for that a little later on. Let's talk about the blunt execution rounds. This is a new perk that's debuted on this pulse rifle. I think this is a fun new perk that's essentially trench barrel on a pulse rifle. It's a callback though to the old Halo 2 button glitch used in competitive play called the BXR, where you'd press B to melee, you press X in Halo 2 to cancel the reload animation, and that would allow you to shoot immediately with your weapon ready after meleeing. So you'd go melee to break shields, cancel the animation, and immediately shoot to the head for the kill without any essentially downtime. The perk can also be abbreviated to BXR to further call back to that button glitch by B for blunt, X for execution, and R for rounds. Basically, if you happen to hit a melee within 15 meters, it says on the perk only charged melees, but it works with any melee within 15 meters, even the ranged melees, as long as again you're within 15 meters of the target that's affected by the melee. When activated, it'll boost your damage to 50 damage per bullet for a critical hit and 31 damage per bullet to the body. And it lasts for 10 seconds, which is a healthy window of time to take advantage of this, but only for a single burst. So only one entire burst will be affected by it. So it works actually while the BXR-55 is stowed. You can get a shotgun melee kill, and that will activate the BXR perk. And you can carry that around, but remember, you only have a single burst to use it. Another neat feature of this perk is it will ready the BXR-55 immediately, similar to how like Lucky Pants with a hand cannon will ready them immediately, even faster than Quick Draw, after you get a melee to shoot really quickly. And this is again another small thing that they've done to be a callback to the BXR button glitch. I think this perk is really great. It doesn't quite feel exotic level powerful. It's very niche, and I want to say requires a healthy amount of setup or practice to actually utilize, and then to actually execute with it has a pretty fair skill requirement because you only have a single burst to utilize with it. There's many times even when I activate it, and even if I just get body shots, it does help me get the 3 burst, but it's not exactly making my kill time insane. The only time where it does become very influential and lethal requires you to land pretty much all headshots, where it does allow the weapon to 2 burst, but you will have to pretty much hit all headshots with it. I think this perk is familiar enough to the Destiny universe, being that it kind of feels like trench barrel, but it takes that extra little step to pay homage to what it's originally from, while being fun to use and having some potential, but taking a lot of niche setup and high skill requirement for the execution. The perk feels fun, it feels rewarding, I don't think it feels broken by any means, and it's a nice little nod. Now let's move on to talking about the stats on this weapon. My role of choice has 60 range, 81 stability, 83 handling, 67 reload, 85 aim assist, 20 zoom, and 100 recoil. I find these stats to be exceptional, and I think 80 stability is a great sweet spot. This is of course again with the first god roll that I mentioned back in that portion of the video. This weapon is definitely a stat beast. Other than the legacy frame, of course, it is a standard 450 RPM pulse, but it's got stats that are exceedingly better than I want to say than most of the 450 RPM pulses. It seems to me as if this is actually most similar to the Infinite Paths 8 pulse, which is the most similar, but still slightly less, in many stat categories, especially getting 86 aim assist because of moving target, and it gets boosted range and aim assist from opening shot, but statistically it does lack in range compared to the BXR. And again, this is somewhat-ish kind of made up for with opening shots. So again, the weapons are very, very similar, oddly enough. I mean, funny enough, even the models of the weapons are kind of similar. So it makes you think. The Battler, though, solves some of the biggest issues with 450 RPM pulses historically through its beefy stat package. Normally, they have poor or inconsistent recoil direction, from what I could see. Low range that further kills already low lethality because of the damage drop-off, and low lethality due to a strict shots to kill ratio that doesn't seem to excel in anything particularly great. This stat package, I think, tries to make up for a lot of their shortcomings, and I don't think this massive stat package is particularly out of line with some of the recent hand cannons we've seen released. Palindrome, Fatebringer, and now Luna all have incredibly massive stat packages for legendary hand cannons, and considering this is an archetype that hasn't had a legendary weapon made for it in a long while and is widely considered subpar, I feel the stat spread makes up for the shortcomings again of this archetype and matches up with the potency of stats on some of the top hand cannons. The only point of concern or debate that comes up for me if I had to choose one might be maybe the aim assist, or is it the range that interacts with it? I'm not sure on either though, because on one hand I think this archetype gets beat at range by the aggressives being the superior choice for really ranged play, and this archetype needs range to stop losing what's already low lethality. And that's been a consistent problem whenever I try and use these in the past. On the other hand, I wonder how this might amplify the high aim assist value and perhaps make the weapon maybe too forgiving. But on that note, maybe the weapon needs to be as forgiving as it is, because again, it still feels like it doesn't have a home, as it still struggles against hand cannons or other archetypes and needs this kind of ease of use or consistency to see remote competitive viability. Now let's talk about the Battler's place in the metagame, its advantages, disadvantages, and how strong I think it is currently and how it might develop. I think one main advantage, and probably the main reason to be using this weapon, is its high versatility. It's got good range to challenge from different scenarios and still deal decent enough damage, and the hipfire enhancements allow it to have a little bit more functionality in close range with more free movement. It performs decently everywhere, but it doesn't particularly master anywhere either. The most obvious downside of this weapon is its suboptimal archetype. Its time to kill matches the 140 hand cannons, but is simply worse because it requires more time on target to achieve it, because this is a burst weapon, so you have to land more bullets, have more time on target, versus the single shot weapons being hand cannons, which require less time on target for the same time to kill. It lacks lethality or reward even for the precision requirement compared to that of the aggressive pulses, which are better at range, more lethal, and have a similar kind of forgiveness for their precision. They lack lethality and forgiveness compared to both the aggressive burst pulse rifles and the rapid fire pulse rifles as well. The 450 archetype has a pretty strict critical hit requirement for a time to kill worse than most pulses and only matches hand cannons. This weapon trades its dueling capabilities from its archetype for added versatility with the hipfire and less restrictive, more evasive movement. So the less restricted movement helps you play more evasively in gunfights or play cover more effectively, and the hipfire gives versatility in close range to play a bit more aggressively and freely despite being a pulse rifle. A big thing I love about this is the combination of hipfire accuracy and the movement speed you get from being able to hipfire allows shotgunners and really aggressive players to be countered more effectively just by maintaining space and having more power to maintain space. I love that. While hipfiring is great and I think is a fun and functional aspect of the weapon, it usually doesn't result in an optimal time to kill. It's usually a 4-shot more times than not. So it further sacrifices or establishes that this sacrifices lethality for unrestricted free movement. Personally, to me, I feel like this is a reasonable trade. And again, as far as its stat package, is this perhaps necessary or justifiable because the archetype needs this help, and it solves problems of the archetype and gives it competitive viability without outright, in my experience at least, feeling broken. What I've noticed as well though is despite its enhancements and benefits, the BXR-55 still struggles against other pulses, and especially against other hand cannons, because it doesn't quite have the lethality of other pulse archetypes, and it's hard to meet the lethality of hand cannons. It struggles, once again, significantly against hand cannon flinch. But another thing I like about this weapon is that it turns that feeling of the 450 RPM pulses of kind of feeling like they don't have a home or particular strength into an identity. It makes this weapon really a master of none, but takes that into an identity by being a master of versatility. Yeah, you might not be amazing anywhere, but you're decent in a wider range of scenarios, while not particularly being the most lethal. I think this weapon's unique, but I'm uncertain if it's powerful or unique enough to be compared to exotics. So personally, I think this is a great model for what special occasion legendary weapons should be, and I'm really happy to see Bungie making unique, cool legendary weapons as well that aren't quite exotic, but can still be special in their own subtle ways. It adds niche traits to a subpar archetype without, in my opinion, feeling outright broken or incredibly or obviously powerful. I don't think it's powerful enough in this case to have a very high influence or potential, and it's niche enough that it's hard to take advantage of or has situational benefits. And above all, it feels special and fun still, even though it might not be the best. I think the enhancements on this weapon are niche, but have good value proposition while still working within the mold of what a legendary pulse rifle is. It's very similar to something like the Messenger with Desperado and its excellent stat package. The Messenger has essentially been the successor to Redrix's Claymore, has phenomenal stats, and has Desperado, which is still a legendary perk exclusive to it. I also like to think that this is a representative of a trend that Bungie is doing of making weapons with multiple great roles, and it's harder to be disappointed with a role than not, and instead you probably aim for a specific role because of what you value or what you prefer for your build, which I think is a really good feeling and I really love about this weapon. I think this is kind of what pinnacle weapons should have been. Pinnacle weapons felt like they could have been exotics and still been overpowered, while this weapon again provides benefit to a subpar archetype while working within what still feels like a legendary option. All in all, I think I would rank this weapon as mid, maybe low, probably mid A tier. It's not quite at the level of Palindrome, Fatebringer, or DMT, which I'd undoubtedly put in S tier, or some of the exotic hand cannons I'd put there as well, but it's certainly a viable competitive option. So you've made it to the end of the video, and now I'm gonna get really cheesy, because this weapon and what it's referring to or what it was inspired by is so nostalgic and means so much to me. This weapon was the start of my journey of where I am today and where I am still going. It was the discovery of a passion, which was competition. And my love of FPS games started with Halo 3 and the battle rifle. And the fact that this weapon is present now in Destiny, in a game that is so different yet so similar, and I've been able and lucky enough to have so many incredible experiences with so many people and make content as I do. It's just so surreal to me to have the weapon that started it all for me and got me hooked now in the game that I'm presently loving and making content for. This weapon to me feels like an icon. It's a reminder of how long it's been, how much time has passed, but also how far I feel I've come, not only with gaming, but in my own personal journey, and how that continues, and I continue to learn every day. But now here in Destiny 2, as the cheesy, nostalgic, sentimental person I am, I get to use my nostalgia as a weapon. And perhaps for me, that is the most fun thing possible. Thanks for watching the video, everyone. Thanks for supporting me, and take it easy.